Okay, I think we'll get started. Today we'll talk about the Virial series and kind of set the stage for how we are going to determine the second virial coefficient from intermolecular potentials. Okay, so let's begin with an ideal gas. And we know the ideal gas equation for a homogeneous gas is PV equals nRT. We're going to always be working in this series in molar quantities. So all the quantities that we get, if you would just multiply by n, then you will get to the extensive properties. What's nice about this is all of these variables are intensive now. Okay, so if we now define this something called the compressibility factor, lowercase z here, and that's going to be defined as, and this should be defined as PV equals PV over RT. So we notice here, if we have an ideal gas, z is 1. Now, let's remind ourselves what an ideal gas is. It's assuming that the components that make up the gas, the particles that make up the gas, have no interaction. And I think it's easy to forget that if we have two ideal gas particles coming at each other, they don't collide, they just pass right through each other. So as far as one ideal gas molecule is concerned, the whole container it's as if it's the only particle in the whole container. Likewise for every other one. So there's no interaction at all. That's what we mean by an ideal gas. Okay, if we remember our thermodynamics, any homogeneous material can be fully determined by two independent variables. So all you need is two independent variables to get all the other variables. And here we're talking about the state functions like temperature, pressure, volume, heat capacity, Helmholtz free energy. All you need for a homogeneous substance is two independent variables. So if we look at our definition of our compressibility factor, we can expand, for one, we can let's choose this to be a function of the two independent variables. And we're free to choose these variables. So we're going to be working throughout this series almost totally with choosing t and v as our independent variables. However, we certainly could choose t and p as our independent variables. We can even do v and p, but that's that doesn't pan out very far. So let's look at this as t and v, and let's expand in one of the variables. So this would be like back in Calc 2, if you had function of two variables, you could do a full expansion, power series expansion in terms of both variables, but here we're going to just expand in terms of one variable. Now, what that means then is that we have coefficients that are functions of the other variable, not the function of the expanded variable. The coefficients in a power series are not functions of the variable you're expanding in. But if there are any other independent variables, they would be. And so this series is infinite, and the idea then is that if this were the equation of state with all infinite number of terms, it would be exact. It would capture the behavior of any real gas. Now, of course, we can't go out to infinity, and in fact, we often want to truncate right here, although there's certainly times when engineers or scientists, when you need to be extra careful, will need to add extra terms. Now, the reason we can truncate here is because when we're talking about gases, we're in a situation where the particle density is low. So if we look at a container with gas in it, by and large, it's empty space. So particles are very far away from each other. One way I like to think about this, and how I hope that students think about this, is just consider water. So if you have 1 mole of water, liquid water, you know that's going to be 18 grams. Let's call it 20 grams. And if you convert that all to a gas, if you boil it up all to a gas, we kind of know that our benchmark for an ideal gas is that at room temperatures, the molar volume of an ideal gas is about 20 liters. It's like 24 if it's at STP. So let's call it 20 liters. So liquid water, 20 milliliters, you turn it into a gas, 20 liters. So it's 1,000 times less dense. So just roughly speaking, with the water molecules in the liquid, they're right next to each other. If we're 1,000 times more dense, they're going to be way far apart from each other. So most of the time, any given particle, any generic particle, is spending its life with no interaction. The next thing that happens is it might hit or collide or interact with another particle. And then there might be times when 3 come together or 27 come together all at once. And of course, those are going to start to be exceedingly rare. And we are going to say that for this series, we're going to focus on the second virial coefficient because a lot can be done with that. And for gases around or even a considerable distance from laboratory conditions, just worrying about the pairwise interactions is often enough. Okay, we certainly could expand this in pressure, but we will be using this. Now, let's define, this will be useful to us down the line, this rho, which is effectively a number density, but because we're working with molar quantities here, let's define it as 1 over the molar volume. So the molar volume is volumes per mole. This would be now moles over volume. So it is a number density. We can just simply take our virial series up here and just do this substitution now. So we have a series in rho where these coefficients are the same. So if we're working with rho or if we're working, it's basically just a change of variables. Okay, now what's interesting and what you want to start to build an intuition for is that B will actually capture the pairwise interactions. C is needed, the third is needed to capture the triplet interactions and so on. And one way you can kind of think about this is you sort of get this first volume for free, and then if we're talking about a pair interaction of this guy, so this is the generic molecule, then with no interaction, right, it doesn't see anything. When you're talking about interaction with one other partner, what's going to be important is the density, right? The number density. And so that's where we get this number density to the first power. If we're trying to find the triplet, right, it's going to depend on the number density and the number density because we need to get two particles there at the same time. And so that will be proportional. Oh, I got this wrong here. That will be the squared term, and so on. So I think the one thing that's a bit unintuitive when you see the virial series is it seems like we're missing a power here. But if you go back up to the definition here, what we're going to do here soon is bring this over and call that P, so that we'd have to divide by molar volume in here or right here, I guess, in which case those powers would come back. So that one we get for free is sitting over here in the definition of Z. Okay, just a quick kind of side topic here, but important. If we look at B and we plot it as a function of temperature, the general feature it has for a real gas is that it's increasing with temperature and that it's negative for low temperatures and positive for high temperatures. So let's get a feel for what it means to be negative or positive. So let's imagine the series truncate. I'll write it just like this. So So for an ideal gas, Z is 1. This is positive, right? This is always positive here. So if B is negative, then Z, if B is less than 0, then Z is less than 1. So let's look at this. If Z is less than 1, it means this numerator is less. Our variable is the 1 over volume, and so for at a given temperature, so at a particular temperature that we've already frozen the temperature, if we're negative, then that means our pressure must be lower than what it is for an ideal gas. And so this is showing that the pressure is lower than an ideal gas. What does that mean? It means that the attraction amongst molecules is dominating, because what is pressure? Pressure is molecules hitting the wall. If there's a net attractive force, that's going to pull the punches a little bit on those molecules hitting the wall, and thus reduce the pressure compared to an ideal gas. Likewise, if this is positive, then Z will be bigger than 1, and the repulsive aspect. So we know the molecule has both an attractive intermolecular force, but if you get it too close to one another, there'll be a kind of a hard sphere repulsion there. So at high temperatures, B is positive, and thus Z is greater than 1, so the pressure is a little bit more than it is than with an ideal gas, so that means repulsion is dominating. Then there's this special value where we might be under non-ideal conditions. So the second virial coefficient would be very important, except that it just happens to be a temperature in which the attraction and the repulsion almost cancel out, and allowing for B to actually equal 0. So if B were to equal 0, then Z equals 1, even though it is not an ideal gas, but it is behaving very much like an ideal gas. So at or near the boil temperature, even under non-ideal conditions, the gas will behave very ideal-like. Okay, so the boil temperature is important. Where it is says things about the type of intermolecular forces and so on. So a very important concept in physical chemistry. Okay, let's look at now this idea of these intermolecular potentials. So in general, we've got our system here, and we will have this sort of no interaction, all by itself, then pairwise, triplet, and so on. But in general, all of these particles, this particle over here, the potential energy it feels is due to all the other particles. So in the most general form, the potential energy of interaction is going to depend on every particle's position and orientation. If the particle, let's say, is a polar molecule or something, and orientation matters. If it doesn't, then it would only depend on its positions in the container. Now, the focus of this course is going to be solely on up to the second virial coefficient. So we're talking about pairwise interaction only. So we're truncating Z right here. And we've said now that this is representing the pairwise interaction. Okay, so that means this is actually going to be a sum of all the different pairwise interactions. So if I'm looking at this molecule right here, then this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, so all these pairwise interactions. However, since this is a homogeneous gas, we choose one molecule, we choose another molecule, there is this, they're all the same, right? They're representative. One generic molecule is representative of the whole system. So we think of the so-called generic pair. So the individual, IJ, we're just going to call that phi, and it's only going to depend on the generic position 1 and 2 and the orientation 1 and 2. So we reduce from Avogadro's number of independent variables down to 4 independent vector variables here. Okay, well, let's set this up for success here. So this is certainly true, but it's awkward. Let's do a change of variables here that will be helpful. So the first thing we can do is think about if I'm like this, or like this, or like this, or like this, I'm going to get the same result for this generic pair. It doesn't matter where in the box it is. All that matters is how far apart each of these are from each other. So a very natural variable would be r, being the difference between these two vectors. So this is a scalar now, right? It's a scalar. It's the intermolecular distance. That's r. And now let's put this in the laboratory axis. So I tried to make these bolded capital letters represent the laboratory axis. It's conventional usually to take the intermolecular axis as the z-axis. So let's imagine this is the z laboratory axis, and then coming out of the board here is the plane. Now, we can represent the orientation of molecule 1 in polar coordinates, spherical polar coordinates, in the same way as we always do. So theta is representing the direction from the z-axis, and then phi1 is the azimuthal angle in the xy plane, x1, y1 plane. Likewise, we can do the same thing for molecule 2. Okay. Well, that's good. We will take these directions relative to the intermolecular axes, but then instead we're going to look at the difference. Just turns out to be a little bit easier if we look at the difference in these angles. The range on these, the domain is 0 to infinity for r, 0 to pi for the thetas, just like in normal spherical coordinates, and then 0 to 2 pi for these differences. So they could differ from each other by up to 2 pi. Okay, so that's kind of it. There's a little bit of I just want to foreshadow a counting issue here. Whenever you're doing these, whenever you're going from the molecular level up to the laboratory level, and we use statistical thermodynamics to do that, there's always an issue of are we counting, are we double counting, and so on. So we are going to see what will appear maybe to be a mysterious factor of 4. And where is that going to come from? Well, for one, we can quickly imagine an overcounting because we assign molecule 1, molecule 2, and then 2 and 1. Okay, so there's going to be a permutation double counting. But then the other is this angle direction. So if I've got, say I've got these two molecules with orientation where it matters, and then they undergo a 2 pi rotation, a rotation by pi, they're still going to elicit the same physics here. So we're going to get a double counting from the angle integration, the angle positioning. So that's a little bit harder to see, but that will come up. And I'll mention this again when we get there, but this is just to kind of get us ready for that. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at some specific models. So we will look at the very classic models that are important to be aware of, the ones that are often used to represent intermolecular interactions.